Every day, millions of Americans carry around one of the strangest objects ever created, a dollar bill. You use it without thinking, for coffee, a tip, maybe a last-minute lottery ticket. It feels ordinary, permanent, almost boring. But look closer. That little green rectangle is the survivor of wars, bank failures, counterfeit empires, political battles, and one massive experiment in human trust. Because here's the strange part. The paper itself is practically worthless. You can't eat it, you can't build with it, and you can't take it to the government and demand a fixed amount of gold or silver. Yet people will work for it. Stores will trade food for it. Entire countries save billions of them. So why does it have value? And why didn't the modern dollar bill even exist until 1929? To understand that, we have to travel back to an America where money could be cut with a knife. Banks printed their own bills, and accepting the wrong $5 note could wipe out your savings. This isn't just the story of American money. It's the story of how America convinced the world to trust a piece of paper. Before the dollar became American, it was Spanish. That's right. In colonial America, one of the most trusted coins was the Spanish silver dollar, commonly called the piece of 8. Why that name? Because it was worth 8 smaller units called reales. And when people needed change, they sometimes cut the coin into pieces. Literally. Imagine pulling out a silver coin and chopping it like a tiny pizza. 2 of its 8 sections equaled 1/4 of the coin. That's where the old expression 2 bits came from. Even the word dollar wasn't originally American. It evolved from the name of a European silver coin. So America's most famous financial symbol started with Spanish silver and a European name. But the colonies didn't have one clean monetary system. They used British coins, Spanish coins, French money, Dutch money, whatever they could find. And when coins became scarce, everyday products took their place. Tobacco could function as money. So could rice. Beaver skins were accepted in some places. Shell beads were used in others. Think about walking into a store today and paying with tobacco leaves. Sounds crazy. But at the time, anything people trusted could become money. And that word, trust, is the key to everything that happens next. When the American Revolution began, the Continental Congress faced a terrifying problem. It needed to fight the British Empire, but it had no reliable national tax system, no real central treasury, and nowhere near enough gold or silver. The army still needed food, soldiers still needed wages, weapons still had to be purchased. So Congress printed paper notes called Continentals. These bills were backed by a promise. If America won the war, the future government would eventually make them valuable. Basically, people were being asked to bet their money on a country that didn't officially exist yet. At first, it worked. Then, Congress printed more, and more, and more. The more notes it printed, the less each note was worth. Prices rose, confidence collapsed, and the currency began falling apart. Then came a brutal twist. The British reportedly pushed counterfeit Continentals into the economy. It was economic warfare. They didn't need to capture a city. They could damage the revolution by destroying confidence in its money. Soon, the notes became almost worthless. That disaster created the phrase, "not worth a continental." America won its independence, but its first national paper currency became a warning. Paper money was dangerous. At least, that's what many Americans believed. So, in 1792, the new government created a national mint and officially defined the American dollar using silver. And here's the fascinating part. The new dollar was modeled around the Spanish silver coins Americans already trusted. Why? Because a government can announce a new currency overnight, but it can't manufacture public confidence that quickly. Metal felt real. It had weight. It could be tested. It seemed safer than a promise printed on paper. But coins created another problem. America was growing fast. People were moving west, businesses were expanding, trade was increasing, and heavy bags of silver weren't exactly convenient. Coins were difficult to transport, easy to steal, and there simply weren't enough of them to support a rapidly growing economy. America needed paper money again. But the federal government didn't want to repeat the continental disaster. So banks stepped in, and things got wild. During the decades before the Civil War, individual banks printed their own notes. Thousands of different designs entered circulation. A $5 bill from a trusted New York bank might be accepted at full value, but a $5 note from a tiny bank hundreds of miles away? Maybe it was worth $5. Maybe $3. Maybe nothing. A merchant had to ask, is this bank real? Is it still operating? Does it have enough gold or silver to redeem this note? And is the bill itself counterfeit? The situation became so confusing that merchants used special guides to identify legitimate notes and known fakes. Imagine needing a reference book every time someone pays you. Counterfeiters loved the chaos. With so many designs circulating, most people couldn't possibly know what every real banknote looked like. Some criminals copied legitimate notes, others altered the numbers, and some created bills for banks that didn't even exist. Then there were the so-called wildcat banks. These banks were sometimes located in remote places, making it extremely difficult for customers to redeem their notes for actual coins. A bank could print impressive-looking money, distribute it, and then disappear. The bill might show an eagle, a ship, or some powerful-looking national symbol. But beautiful artwork didn't mean there was silver in the vault. One rumor could trigger panic. People would rush to exchange their paper for coins. If the bank didn't have enough metal, it failed. And suddenly, someone's life savings became decorated paper. So what finally changed the system? A war. In 1861, the Civil War began, and the federal government faced a familiar crisis. It needed an enormous amount of money, and fast. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers had to be armed, fed, transported, and paid. At first, the government issued notes that could be exchanged for precious metal. But the war consumed money faster than the treasury could supply it. Gold and silver reserves came under pressure, so the government made a historic move. It issued paper currency that wasn't immediately redeemable for gold or silver. These notes were backed by federal law and the credit of the United States. Because green ink appeared on the back, people began calling them greenbacks. The nickname stuck. But greenbacks weren't just new money. They represented a massive shift in power. For the first time, the federal government had a widely circulating paper currency capable of connecting the economies of different states. Money was becoming a tool of national unity, while the nation itself was being torn apart. And here's another surprise. The first federal $1 note issued during the Civil War didn't feature George Washington. It featured Treasury Secretary Salmon P. Chase. Yes, the man helping oversee the new currency ended up on the currency. Washington appeared on the $1 United States note later. But even after the war, America's money remained complicated. Different notes represented different promises. Some were backed primarily by government credit. Some came from nationally chartered banks. Silver certificates represented silver held by the Treasury. Gold certificates were connected to gold. They were all called dollars, but they weren't exactly the same kind of dollar. Then, counterfeiters attacked again. Fake money became such a major threat that, in 1865, the government created the Secret Service. But it wasn't originally created to protect the president. Its first major mission was fighting counterfeit currency. That's how dangerous fake money had become. Counterfeiters understood something powerful. They didn't have to replace every real bill. They only had to create doubt. If people became suspicious of every note, normal trade slowed down. Trust was the real target, and that forced American currency to evolve. Bills became more complex, with detailed engraving, special paper, treasury seals, and serial numbers. The dollar wasn't just designed to look important. It was designed to defend itself. Then, in 1929, American money physically changed. The old bills were much larger than the ones we use today. The government reduced their size, saving paper and ink while making them easier to print, carry, sort, and store. Designs also became more consistent. The modern-looking American dollar had finally arrived. And the timing was almost unbelievable. The new bills entered circulation during the same year the stock market crashed. Banks failed, families lost savings, unemployment exploded. The clean, standardized dollar appeared just as confidence in the financial system was collapsing. But the biggest transformation was still ahead. For generations, Americans believed paper money needed gold or silver behind it. During the Great Depression, the country moved away from domestic gold convertibility. Then, in 1971, the United States ended the dollar's remaining formal link to gold in international monetary arrangements. The dollar was no longer a ticket for a fixed amount of precious metal. So what backed it? Not gold, not silver, something far more powerful and fragile. Trust in the United States government, its economy, its institutions, and the belief that someone else will accept the dollar tomorrow. And somehow, after losing its direct gold connection, the dollar didn't disappear. It became the world's dominant currency. Here's the final twist. Most American dollars aren't paper anymore. They exist as numbers inside bank databases. Your paycheck can arrive digitally. You can spend it with a card, move it through an app, or send it across the country without touching a single bill. Money began as metal people could weigh. Then it became paper people could hold. Now it's mostly information people can't even see. So the next time someone hands you a dollar, look at it differently. That bill is more than money. It's the survivor of a revolution. It carries the memory of failed banks, secret counterfeit operations, wartime panic, political conflict, and one of the biggest trust experiments in history. Its real power isn't hidden in the paper. It lives in the invisible agreement between two people. One person believes the dollar has value, and the other agrees. That agreement happens millions of times every day, quietly, instantly, almost automatically. But if people ever stop believing, the world's most recognizable currency becomes exactly what it physically is: a small piece of printed paper. And that may be the greatest mystery of money. We spend our lives chasing it. We fight over it. We save it for the future. But its value has never truly lived inside the dollar. It has always lived inside us.